What if everything you believe to be true, your goals, your morals, your very sense of self, was quietly controlled not by an external force, but by invisible chains you forged yourself? Chains so subtle, so deeply woven into your mind, that you hardly notice them, until one day they begin to dictate the course of your entire life. Standards, rules, beliefs, invisible signposts guiding our decisions, what to desire, what to accept, what to reject. They feel like personal choices, but they are rarely questioned. Instead, they become prisons, cages crafted from our own minds. Ask yourself, when was the last time you truly examined your standards? Not the obvious ones, laws, social norms, but the personal, intimate standards that shape your daily reality. The invisible boundaries defining what success looks like, what happiness means, what makes you worthy or not. Throughout history, revolutions did not simply erupt because of weapons or political upheaval. They began with a radical shift in standards, a collective awakening that challenged the very foundations of what was considered normal. The Renaissance shattered the chains of medieval dogma. The Enlightenment questioned the divine right of kings and the unquestioned authority of tradition. Today, in a world flooded with information yet shackled by unseen forces, the question remains, can we change our standards? And through them, change our lives? This is not a story about external enemies. It is about the silent power inside your own mind, a power that can either imprison you or set you free. Because changing your standards isn't just a choice, it's a revolution of the self. And in that revolution lies the possibility to rewrite your destiny. History is not merely a timeline of dates and events. It is the story of humanity's evolving standards. The invisible rules we live by have shaped the rise and fall of civilizations, the collapse of empires, and the birth of new worlds. When these standards shift, everything changes. Consider the Renaissance, that great awakening after centuries of medieval darkness. For hundreds of years, the dominant standards were set by rigid religious dogma, a worldview that confined knowledge, creativity, and the very idea of what it meant to be human. Yet, slowly and deliberately, thinkers and artists began to challenge these inherited beliefs. They dared to place human reason, individual inquiry, and empirical observation above unquestioned faith. This was not a random moment of change. It was a profound psychological revolution, a collective redefinition of what was worthy of pursuit. By changing the standards of knowledge and truth, the Renaissance shattered the chains of intellectual imprisonment and unleashed a flood of creativity that still shapes our world today. Centuries later, the Enlightenment continued this trajectory. It reimagined the foundations of society itself. No longer would power be justified by birthright or divine decree. Instead, new standards of equality, liberty, and human rights emerged, standards based on reason and universal principles. This shift didn't just topple monarchies, it challenged the very notion of authority and the legitimacy of unquestioned tradition. Philosophers like Kant, Voltaire, and Rousseau planted the seeds for modern democracy by daring to ask, what if the rules we accept are neither natural nor inevitable, but constructed and therefore changeable? But history did not stop there. In the 20th century, social revolutions around the globe exposed how entrenched standards perpetuated inequality, injustice, and oppression. Civil rights movements, feminist struggles, and decolonization efforts revealed that accepted norms about race, gender, and power were not universal truths, but conditioned beliefs. By changing these standards, entire societies were forced to confront their own complicity in systems of control. These moments are not isolated accidents of history. They are manifestations of a deeper human capacity to awaken, question, and reconstruct reality itself. Changing standards is not about rebellion for its own sake. It is about recognizing the frameworks that confine us and deliberately choosing new ones that expand our freedom. Today, we stand at a similar crossroads. Our inherited standards about success, identity, happiness, and truth are being tested like never before. As we navigate an age of information overload, surveillance, and manipulation, it is worth asking, which of our unchallenged standards are shackles disguised as freedom? And which new standards might revolutionize not just society, but the very way we understand ourselves? The power to change lies not in distant revolutions or political upheavals, but in the invisible choices we make every day about what we accept as true and valuable. Because history teaches us this: civilizations rise and fall on the standards they hold, and when those standards change, reality itself changes. Standards are not just abstract ideas floating outside us. They become deeply embedded within the architecture of our minds. They shape how we see the world, how we interpret every experience, and ultimately, how we live. But how do these invisible rules take root so firmly that they become chains we hardly notice? The answer lies in the intricate workings of the human psyche. From the moment we are born, our minds are wired to seek patterns and certainty. This makes sense. Uncertainty breeds anxiety, and anxiety threatens survival. So, one of the key forces at play is cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension we feel when our beliefs clash with new information or experiences. Our minds are remarkably skilled at reducing this discomfort, often by twisting reality, ignoring evidence, or rationalizing contradictions. This defense mechanism is why we cling stubbornly to outdated or harmful standards, rather than face the mental upheaval that comes with change. Alongside this is confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out and remember information that reinforces our existing beliefs, while dismissing anything that challenges them. It's a self-reinforcing loop, where our standards become the filter through which we view the world, shaping what we notice and what we ignore. Then there is social conformity. Human beings are inherently social creatures. Our survival has depended on belonging to groups. From childhood, we learn that adhering to group standards ensures acceptance and safety. This pressure to conform embeds collective standards deep within us, making the prospect of breaking free not just intellectually difficult, but emotionally terrifying. To reject these standards can feel like risking isolation, or worse, rejection, by those we love. This psychological entanglement explains why changing standards is so difficult, even when those standards cause suffering or limit our potential. It is not simply a matter of willpower. It requires confronting powerful mental defenses and social pressures. But awareness is the first step toward freedom. By peering deeply into our own mental frameworks, by observing where our beliefs create tension or resistance, we begin to see the invisible chains. The moment we recognize cognitive dissonance or notice the pull of confirmation bias, we create a space for questioning, for reflection, and for change. This psychological foundation reveals a profound truth. Our perception of reality is not objective. It is shaped, filtered, and limited by the standards we carry within us. To change our lives, then, we must first change the lenses through which we see everything. The journey is neither easy nor painless. It requires courage to face uncomfortable truths and the humility to admit that some of our deepest beliefs may no longer serve us. But in breaking these mental chains, we open the door to new possibilities, new ways of thinking, feeling, and being. And with this newfound clarity, the world itself begins to shift. Because when the standards inside us change, the reality we inhabit changes too. In today's world, the invisible chains of standards have become more sophisticated and more dangerous than ever before. The standards we live by are no longer just the products of personal or cultural evolution. They are meticulously crafted, engineered, and weaponized by powerful forces to control not only what we do, but how we think, what we value, and even who we believe ourselves to be. Modern media, propaganda, and social platforms act as relentless gatekeepers, continuously reinforcing specific standards designed to shape our desires, fears, and identities. What does success mean? How should happiness be pursued? What defines morality or worthiness? These are not neutral questions, but battlegrounds where narratives are fought and imposed. Consider how consumer culture convinces us that endless acquisition is the path to fulfillment, a standard that drives behavior while masking an insatiable emptiness. Social media platforms amplify curated versions of reality, setting impossible standards of beauty, achievement, and lifestyle that fuel anxiety and discontent. News outlets and political propaganda manufacture consent by shaping which ideas are acceptable, which are dangerous, and which are simply invisible. These standards serve the interests of institutions that thrive on control: corporations, governments, and ideological movements. By normalizing certain beliefs and behaviors, they create a framework in which individuals become predictable, manageable, and ultimately exploitable. The freedom to choose is increasingly constrained by invisible algorithms and cultural pressures that push conformity under the guise of personal choice. But this control is not absolute. It operates through subtle psychological manipulation, making it difficult to recognize. The standards we absorb today are embedded in memes, viral trends, and daily news cycles, diffused so widely that questioning them feels like swimming upstream against a current we barely perceive. This creates a profound tension between individual autonomy and systemic influence. We are told we live in an age of unprecedented freedom and information, yet many of our standards are dictated by forces that profit from maintaining the status quo. The very tools meant to liberate us often serve to bind us tighter. To challenge these default standards is to confront not only external power structures, but also the internalized beliefs that make us complicit. It requires an act of radical awareness and resistance, the willingness to see behind the carefully constructed narratives, to question the assumptions baked into our culture, and to risk alienation for the sake of authenticity. The urgency of this task cannot be overstated. As technology evolves, so do the methods of control, more pervasive, more insidious. Yet within this challenge lies a hidden opportunity. By consciously choosing to redefine the standards we live by reclaiming our mental autonomy, we can disrupt these systems of manipulation. Changing your standards today is a revolutionary act, a refusal to be a passive recipient of manufactured reality. It is the first step toward reclaiming agency in a world designed to erode it. And though the path is difficult, fraught with social pressure and internal resistance, it is the only way to break free from the invisible chains that bind millions. Because in this era of manipulation, the true battleground for freedom is the and changing your standards may be the most radical rebellion of all. Changing the standards that govern your life is not a simple act. It's not something that happens overnight or by mere desire. It is a courageous journey, one that demands radical self-honesty, relentless questioning, and a willingness to confront discomfort and uncertainty. The first step begins with awareness, recognizing the standards that silently shape your thoughts, emotions, and actions. This requires looking inward with unflinching honesty, peeling back layers of conditioned beliefs to uncover what you truly accept and why. This process, often uncomfortable, is essential because it exposes the mental frameworks that have long operated beneath your conscious mind. Philosophy offers powerful tools for this exploration. The Socratic method, for example, encourages relentless questioning. Why do I believe this? What evidence supports it? Could the opposite be true? These questions break down assumptions, revealing contradictions and opening space for new perspectives. It is not about finding immediate answers, but about cultivating a mindset that refuses to settle for inherited or convenient beliefs. Psychology deepens this process with techniques like cognitive reframing. Throughout history, from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, from social revolutions to personal awakenings, we see a pattern. Transformation begins when someone dares to question what is accepted as truth. The chains that once bound minds and societies dissolve, replaced by new possibilities. Today, the stakes are higher than ever. We live in a world awash with information, yet drowning in control and manipulation. The standards we unconsciously accept may be the very walls confining. So, walls constructed by forces seeking to shape our desires, beliefs, and actions for their own gain. But within each of us lies the power to change this, to reject passivity, to become active, conscious architects of our values and realities. Changing your standards is not just a personal journey. It is a radical act of freedom and creation. It demands courage to face uncomfortable truths, humility to unlearn what no longer serves, and resolve to build new frameworks that elevate the self and the collective. Imagine a reality where standards are chosen deliberately, where they empower rather than imprison, where they nurture growth instead of fear, where they inspire connection instead of division. This is not a distant utopia. It begins with you. Every thought you challenge, every belief you reframe, every standard you reshape contributes to this new reality. Because when standards change, the world changes with them. The question is no longer if change is possible, but if you are willing to become the agent of that change. The revolution of the mind awaits. The future is yours to define.